Hello, I'm Rob Terry, and welcome to this video on how we treat and understand trauma and attachment insecurity in porn and sex addiction treatment. Gabor Mate is one of my favorite voices in the addiction space. He says, addiction begins with solving a problem, and the problem is that of human pain, emotional pain. The first question is not why the addiction, it's why the pain. And he believes addiction is always rooted in trauma. The old school view on treating trauma and addiction recovery is that you didn't do it right away. Maybe you did it after 6 months, after the client is sober for 6 months or a year. However, that is not considered the best practice anymore. And research suggests that treating trauma right away in addiction recovery helps the client gain sobriety and reinforces the CBT that we do with the behavioral patterns. To understand trauma, let's cover a little refresher on brain science. Our brain is a very expensive organ in terms of our calories. Our brain uses about a quarter, 25% of our daily calorie budget. And our prefrontal cortex takes about 8 seconds to process information. The subconscious subcortical brain can react in milliseconds. So we have developed a very efficient process of combining the different parts of the brain and to maximize this brain processing versus the calorie usage. We automate. The subcortical brain is where we automate behavioral patterns. You might recognize this by thinking of if you've been driving for 20 minutes and it's a regular drive. Sometimes you think, what have I been doing? How did I get to where I am? I don't even remember how I did this. And what happens is our brain automates this drive home. And this is a feature, not a bug. This is a great thing about our brains, about the human brain. However, this kind of goes bad on us when what's being automated is a fight, flight, or freeze response to a traumatic event. Severe trauma causes us to react, to be able to cope in a fight, flight, or freeze response. And often this response becomes stored and automated in our implicit memory in the subconscious subcortical brain, which results in an overactive nervous system as we go back to this response when familiar events, triggers come up. These traumatic events leave us with internalized shame, negative core beliefs like I am worthless, incapable, or that people or life is not safe. We in sex addiction, we found a great way to cope with trauma. Porn and other sexual behaviors are very effective flight responses. So I'm feeling anxiety about an upcoming work deadline, and my amygdala processes this anxiety as a threat, sends out a threat response, and it might take 8 seconds for my prefrontal cortex to process this anxiety and to understand this is just some anxiety and I can deal with this. But meanwhile, our subconscious brain has reacted and our hands are clicking a website or scrolling through our phone to cope with the negative emotion. That sounds really tough, like a bad situation. How do we overcome this? But what's awesome is that the brain has the ability to heal, and we call this neuroplasticity. A healthy brain has good flow, left to right, front to back, top to bottom, and a brain impacted by trauma has blockages, and what we need to do is build new neural pathways and integrate the brain. Parts work is a great way to do this, where we have, from an IFS view, we have an inner wounded child that's storing the negative core belief. a harsh inner critic that's reinforcing the negative core belief, an addiction part that's coping with this by escaping to an escaping behavior. And these parts are not all connected. And so from a brain perspective, we can think of neural pathways that are blocked. And from a IFS perspective, we can think about integrating these parts and getting them to know each other and healing them. We treat trauma using EMDR, IFS, ACT, and trauma-focused CBT. With trauma, there's the idea that talk therapy can sometimes not be as effective because we're using our prefrontal cortex, our logical processing, and the bad stuff, the trauma, is stored in the subcortical brain. And so somatic therapies that utilize the connection, the mind-body connection, and recognizing where we're feeling these reactions in the body, this leads back to the prefrontal cortex as we feel this all in the body and can process trauma. And these are somatic therapies like EMDR, IFS that we use to treat trauma. Trauma, we traditionally think of as capital T trauma, a one-time major event, like a violent event, being sexually abused, death of a loved one. This causes trauma. However, many of us haven't experienced that but still have trauma. Little t trauma, things like being ignored, harshly criticized, having our feelings invalidated, being harshly punished unfairly, having overly rigid family environment, all of these can add up and have a cumulative effect of the same as big T trauma. And we call this CPTSD, complex PTSD, or relationship trauma. CPTSD, or relational trauma, causes insecure attachment. This is sort of the main symptom that this causes, and then insecure attachment causes all these other symptoms we'll talk about. Or you can think of trauma causes the symptoms. But I like to think of it as insecure attachment. I kind of use trauma and insecure attachment synonymously. Dan Brown, the late Dan Brown, he was a Harvard psychiatrist and one of my favorite minds when it comes to trauma and attachment. He believes that CPTSD often gets worse using traditional talk therapy, and he believes that treating attachment is actually an easier, quicker, and more effective method to treat trauma than trying to treat trauma directly. So let's get into attachment theory. Secure attachment is like having a warm blanket as we go through life. Insecure attachment is like walking through life without that warm blanket, or like feeling like our feelings are always a live wire. Negative emotion is amplified, and it's hard to soothe ourselves. Some symptoms of insecure attachment: hypersensitivity to rejection or criticism, inability to soothe ourselves when negative emotion surfaces, impulsive or addictive behavior, loneliness, social alienation, and disconnection, even when we're in a relationship or when we're in a group. It just makes it hard to connect and difficult to feel like our relationship needs are being met. We have excessive reassurance seeking sometimes. The ADHD element, RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, I believe also is a manifestation of attachment insecurity. An overview of attachment theory. John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth developed attachment theory in the 1970s. The idea is that humans are born completely dependent. We are social creatures. We co-regulate our emotions. As a baby and a child, that co-regulation is with our parents. As an adult, we co-regulate with our long-term romantic partner. Usually, humans do that. When a baby becomes dysregulated, something's wrong. The diaper's wet, or the baby's hungry, or they have an emotional need, they're frightened. The mother attends to the baby calms down. And that becomes an attachment relationship where the baby relies on the mother to be able to calm down and get its needs met. When that's done successfully and the baby feels that that's done successfully, then the baby develops a secure attachment. But when it's not, then becomes an insecure attachment. So John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, starting in the 70s, developed attachment theory. They did all this research with babies and children and identified 4 internal working models of attachment. The secure attachment is the first one, and that's when the child can get its needs met successfully and get soothed and feel secure. There are 3 types of insecure attachment. One is when the baby is not getting its needs met, that it deactivates the attachment system, and then that is avoidant attachment, and that is when we fear and have avoidance of closeness and intimacy. Maybe we isolate and we can't trust, and we don't feel comfortable opening up to our partner. That's avoidant attachment. And these I'm speaking as kind of a mixing language between a baby and an adult. We tend to carry these attachment styles forward with us, and they tend to be somewhat fixed. However, bad relationships or more trauma as an adult can shift us from secure to insecure, or move us further insecure. Also, therapy or being in a good relationship can move us from insecure to secure. Okay, so first insecure style is avoidant. Then the second one is to hyperactivate the attachment system, and that's anxious or preoccupied attachment. That's what I was. I still am a little bit, probably anxious attachment. I'm working on it. I believe I've moved to secure attachment, but my anxious attachment still comes up a little bit. Used to be pretty bad. Anxious attachment is the fear of abandonment and rejection, and we will hyperactivate. We might get clingy or codependent. We're really, really focused on what our partner's doing, and if they're loving us the way we think they should, or we're really concerned about thinking like I'm more into my partner than they're into me. Things like that is anxious attachment. It's kind of the opposite of avoidant attachment. Then the third insecure attachment style is fearful avoidant, which is we alternate between both of these anxious and avoidant styles, and that we usually get there through abuse. Avoidant attachment, we usually get there from neglect and getting our attachment bids rejected over and over. Anxious attachment, we usually get there by having a caretaker that's depressed or anxious or addicted and really unreliable, inconsistent. So we're constantly checking to see how our caretaker is this a good day or a bad day? That develops anxious attachment. So this is attachment theory, and this has grown and a lot of this informs a lot of therapy now, and a lot of therapists view if you're really, really strong attachment theory, which I am, you almost don't believe in the diagnosis manual of diagnosing with depression or anxiety or borderline or narcissism, and you kind of view all of these as a sort of a manifestation of attachment insecurity in different directions. And that's kind of how I view things and how I view addiction, for the most part. So even though about 50% of Americans are securely attached, about 50% are insecure. However, the 50% of us that are insecure account for 90% or more of the cases for addiction, eating disorders, severe depression, anxiety, account for 80 to 90% of the criminal system. Patrick Carnes found that 92% of the clients that sought treatment for sex addiction had insecure attachment. And these numbers have been backed by other research. We often hear that addiction is the opposite of addiction is connection. You've probably heard that quote. You've also probably heard that sex addiction is an intimacy disorder. And I think that this attachment, this trauma and attachment science kind of explains why that is the case. So attachment, just like trauma attachment, security can be healed. We can move from insecure to secure attachment. And as a therapist, that's my, I guess as a therapist, I really shouldn't have goals for my clients, but I do. I'm kind of a halfway therapist, halfway coach, and I have goals and for my clients, and helping them move from insecure attachment to secure attachment is one of my most important things that I'm helping clients do. Traditionally, we think that the therapist provides the model for the therapeutic relationship, provides the model for a secure attachment partner, and that relationship can help the client become secure. And I do believe in that. However, that is slow and unreliable. And I think there are a lot better, effective, and quicker methods to gain healing in our attachment. Mindfulness, mindful awareness, metacognition, to be aware of when we're doing these insecure attachment behaviors, and to just be aware. That's always the start. If we can name it, we can tame it, right? Group therapy is very effective for attachment security. Therapy aimed specifically at increasing attachment security, like IFS, where we're reparenting or we're providing corrective experiences to we identify the child parts of ourselves that are still kind of hurting and experiencing insecure attachment, and we cultivate the wise adult reparenting energy inside of us to move to secure attachment. Self-compassion work, healing our shame. All of this helps us move from insecure attachment to secure attachment. Self-compassion might be the biggest. And Karuna, if you don't know this, Karuna is our company name, is the Buddhist word for self-compassion. Self-compassion guides everything that we do. And as we increase our self-compassion, we can pull ourselves towards secure attachment and become better in all the aspects of mental health, our depression and anxiety, our addictive behaviors. We have a lot of our individual therapy, group therapy, and the whole outpatient program, the PowerPoints and videos that we do, many of that is aimed at healing our attachment, moving to secure attachment. So that's an overview. I love to do this work. My work has been to become the best sex addiction therapist that I can be. And as I've done this, what I've realized that really what I'm doing is I'm helping men with maladaptive behavior patterns that are caused by attachment insecurity. That's really what we're doing. And let's move towards secure attachment. Thanks for watching to the end of this video.